Well, hey, welcome to the Balance Podcast. My name is Chaplain Tony Repic, and I'm here at Biddle Air National Guard Base in Horsham, Pennsylvania, and this is the studio. If you're looking through video, you'll see we have a little studio set up here, and we're going to kind of improve this as we move forward and having some engaging discussions, and centered around this concept, as I mentioned in a previous video to the folks here at our wing. But to the greater audience, this podcast is called The Balance because we're looking at these 4 areas of life that make us whole: our mental, social, physical, spiritual health. And so every topic that we do, every guest we bring in, we're going to have good discussions about something in that realm so that we can be successful in life and we can have fulfilling careers. And today, I'm excited about the guest that I have here with me. And he's a 12-year-old young man. He's one of my favorite people because he's my son. This is my son, Caleb. I got him in the studio today. I think he's excited to be here. He's going to share some perspectives and give some resources and tools and ideas as a 12-year-old, not only for 12-year-olds or young people that have moms and dads in the military and how to be successful through deployments and through challenging, difficult times because of what we do, but also for parents, for service members, for their families, because what we do is pretty unique. And sometimes we don't understand what it's like to be a young person and just what they're thinking through as mom and dad is preparing to deploy or to do some mission or go away to a school. So again, think about in the whole life here. What can you put in your toolkit? There's a whole bunch of things we could be thinking of here, but mainly this is a podcast opportunity to sit down with, like I said, a young person, learn their perspective and have conversation with them about what it's like to deploy, how to prepare, what does a 12-year-old go through. So, without further ado, here's my guest, my son Caleb. I wanted him to just quickly introduce himself, tell us a little bit about what you like to do, how old you are, which I already said, but how old you are, and maybe your favorite subject in school.
All right, hello, my name is Caleb. I'm 12 years old. I like to do many things. I like to play outside. I like sports. I play floor hockey. I like to game, and my favorite subject in school would be history.
History, nice. What era of history do you like?
Probably the Cold War.
The Cold War.
With the USSR and the NATO allies and everything like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I kind of knew that, but I like hearing you talk about it again. So, yeah, Dad just came back from deployment a few months ago, and as I was talking to you, telling you about this podcast, and I think I asked you, but you were interested immediately in wanting to take part in this conversation to help other people out, right? And so I think we were just having some basic conversation about, hey, how did you prepare? And I don't think I ever really took a step back and even in the middle of the preparation time or leading up to going overseas, ever really asked you like, hey, how are you processing this? Sometimes as adults we just think a kid thinks kid things and that's it. So let me first ask this question. As the deployment was happening, we knew it was coming, right, for a few years. How did you prepare for the deployment yourself?
Well, really, honestly, the best thing that helped with me was talking about it with my dad and my mom, and just like trying my hardest to set up things during the time he was away to distract me from why he's away and how long he'll be away for, and just try to hold me over until he comes back and basically just put your mind on something else.
Interesting. So were you thinking about that was going to be your strategic approach whenever I was gone? Or, as you're preparing, you really don't know what it's going to be like without dad until dad leaves, or without mom until mom leaves, right? I know you've been through a deployment when I was or when you were 2, maybe like 2 or 3, right? And a few times I went what's called TDY, temporary duty, to places in the U.S. for a month here, a couple months there, right? But 6 months is a long time, and from 2, the developmental stage now that 12 years old was way different, right? So were you thinking about, hey, my life I'm gonna have to change some things before I left?
Oh yeah, I was worried that just my way of life would be totally different, And I'm not a person of change. I'm not the biggest fan of change. I hate change. So with my life changed drastically. And it was hard leading up to when he was deployed. But, you just gotta not think about it.
Okay. So, yeah, you mentioned about trying not to think about it. So I have a question for you. Because you kind of expressed this to me at some point. Were you a little afraid or fearful for my safety and even maybe for yours without me being home?
Yeah, I was very I was very concerned about your safety because at the time you were in the Middle East, and that was at the time when the Taliban was taking over Afghanistan again, and they had crude missiles and they were in the Yemen, the Houthi were getting control, and they also had crude missiles and they were firing over, and I was just scared that something could happen like that.
Interesting. So, yeah, so those are those fears that you have and thoughts that you have, and so at 12, you probably knew some of that was going on around the world. Just because? Why?
Just because you're older now. And you have access to technology, and you can physically look up stuff about certain countries or what's happening around the world. You can look at news sites. It's just when you're older and you have technology, it's more free. But sometimes being that free and having that access isn't the best.
Wow.
For you.
So, as a parent, or let's say even as an aunt or uncle that has a younger child, or you're not even really young, but someone that can get online and look things up. Sometimes we think as adults, hey, these kids they're not going to understand it, so we won't talk about what's happening in other parts of the world where we're going to end up. But what I think I hear you saying is that you're savvy enough and you understand technology enough that you can go and do some of your own research if you know where mom or dad's kind of even sort of going. It doesn't have to even be the specific place, right? So as an adult, we probably should be maybe more proactive at talking through what it looks like where we're going as well, right? Because if we try to pretend maybe as an adult, and I'm asking you this question, if we pretend as an adult, oh, don't worry about it, I'm going to be safe, I'm going over into this country, and we let a 12-year-old, and your brother was 10 at the time I deployed, you guys can go online and look these things up. And you might get more fearful if you see something in a country going on where you think mom or dad's going to. Is that a correct assessment?
I think so, yes. But honestly, for younger children who don't know how to, use and navigate technology, I feel like the best thing for them is to of course let them know you're going on deployment early. Just don't let them know what's happening there, because if they think, oh, a bunch of people with guns are coming to where daddy's going or mommy's going, it's gonna be very, very hard on them, even if they're younger. Younger people still have feelings. They're just not as grown up or as mature. But for the older kids, or for anybody older, you can just literally go to Google, search up what is happening in the Middle East, and hundreds of things will come up: bombings, missiles,
sure,
active shooters,
right?
And it's just.
So what you're saying is we don't need to get detailed, but we probably need to paint a picture.
Yes. So
that way you're like, hey, this is where I'm going. I'm going to be safe because I'll be surrounded by security forces teams and whoever else is in the area, right? But not to pretend that I'm not going to maybe a potentially dangerous spot as well, right? Because you could find those things out. So that's an interesting perspective. So you mentioned during the deployment to me that first of all, before we get to what you did during deployment, you're in a unique situation because you were the oldest boy left behind, right? I mean, your brother's 10, there's you, your sister, and obviously mom. Did you feel a little more responsibility of being a boy or wanting to be the man or whatever in the house, if that makes sense? Was there any pressure on you?
I don't think I wasn't. I feel like I was pressuring myself. No one was pressuring me.
Okay. Yeah.
So, of course, since we don't have another person in the house, probably the strongest person, the one who's supposed to lead the family, of course you're gonna have some more pressure if you're the next one in line, and you need to do more. You need responsibilities. You have to do more. You're gonna have to help mom or dad or whoever goes, help their counterpart or their spouse. You gotta have to help them out, because if you don't, it'll be like, let's say you run like a small business of a team of 5. You lose the co-owner. What do you got to do now? You have to step up and do what the co-owner did.
That makes sense. Yeah. But you said you brought that kind of on yourself, right? It wasn't like I pressured you or mom pressured you to think that way. That's just what you were thinking, right? Is that right? Yeah. And it's interesting. I never thought about that before. I mean, I didn't know you were going to put that pressure on yourself. So that's very interesting. And for those that are going to be listening to this podcast, especially those here at the wing, the 111th Attack Wing, and we deploy quite a bit, and so maybe there's going to be some young person who listens to this, Caleb, or even again, mom or dad, who's just like, hey, I never thought about this before, are going to tune in. And so I really appreciate you sharing and just being transparent. I know it's not easy for a 12-year-old to share some of this. It wasn't. We had a tough deployment, and there's a lot of things that happened back home, and there was COVID that went on, so I had to leave earlier, unexpectedly, which that threw a wrench in our plans. I missed your birthday. We were planning on doing something for your birthday right before I left, so that's hard for a young person to absorb and take in. So coping now down as Dad was downrange, right? You mentioned there's a few things you did. You tried to not think about it, but what were ways that we were able to engage, or that you thought we engaged well and were able to stay connected?
So as I mentioned, what I like to do, I'd like to play video games. So what we did when my dad was overseas, we got a video game system that was handheld, and we played.
What is it? What system was it?
It was a Nintendo. I think it was a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, Switch. Yep.
And we basically just played games, and it really helped me connect with them more, because FaceTime, you can do stuff, but after you talk, there's not really too much to say.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you aren't able to get a gaming system, you can play mobile games. And if you're not a big video gamer, what we did whenever my dad was overseas, we went on FaceTime or anything. If you don't have FaceTime, call, Zoom, Skype. We played board games. We played what was it called? I think it was Scattergories, and it was fun. And that's something you gotta do. You gotta learn to adapt to the situation.
Yeah, that's good, man. No, that's helpful to hear that. I didn't know exactly how that was gonna work, because you were in different time zones, but we used to set some time up and be able to still stay connected, and then that worked out pretty well. So that's one way to connect. Any other ways that you think, maybe, let's say someone's not a video gamer, that's not their thing. You did mention the board games. We did that a couple times too, which was fun. What else would have helped, maybe, or would help someone to stay connected with mom, dad, someone that they love, that's away for that period of time? Anything else?
So you could probably do things like, I don't know, maybe art competitions or something. I'm thinking this off the top of my head. We never really did this.
Yeah.
Or something.
It's alright if you don't have anything. Didn't know if there was something else you thought.
Not really anything else.
So you maybe do a drawing, or try to build something, I
was gonna say, I forgot.
Go ahead.
This, fantasy football.
Oh yeah, that's right.
We did that.
That's right.
Fantasy, whatever, sports.
So technology is really, it's amazing today.
Oh, yes.
So those are some of the advantages of having technology, right? Is being able to use it to connect in various ways. So let me ask you this: what was your biggest fear? Let's say the middle point of the deployment. What was the biggest fear that you had, and what were you doing to get through some of these challenging, fearful moments or days that you were experiencing?
Well, honestly, my biggest fear was that my dad wouldn't be able to come home because of the Taliban in Afghanistan, and that he would have to stay longer because of COVID. Because it was pretty rough for us. It wasn't necessarily an easy deployment, but of course we got through it. My biggest fear was that he'd have to stay longer and not be able to come back. And what I did, it always helps to talk about it. I went to my mom, I talked about it with her, and eventually it made me feel a lot better. And then I talked to my siblings about it, and I talked to my friends about it, and they were supportive. And that's something you really got to do. Communication is key.
No, that's good. Yeah. Do you think it's hard for some people to communicate and talk?
Oh, I think it is. But sometimes it's very, very, I know it's very, very hard to get over that fear. I had a fear of communication. But sometimes in situations like this, I'm not going to say, oh, be a man up. I'm just saying, try your best to get over the fear. If you're fearful, don't necessarily, if you want to, okay, how about this? If you want to work up to it, the best way to work up to it is to talk in smaller conversations with more comfortable people. And then as you get better at it, you could talk in bigger conversations with other people who you're not as comfortable with. And basically, that's mainly what you have to do if you don't want to communicate.
Yep.
It's kind of hard if you don't.
So you're almost saying you kind of have to not force yourself, but you sort of do. You have to kind of lean forward and be proactive and say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this, and just see how the person maybe responds to you, right? So if it's your sibling maybe, or mom, or a family member, sometimes you're not always going to get a good response back. So you just have to kind of feel out the situation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Because if you don't get a response back, if you don't get a good response back, it's gonna ruin. You're not gonna want to do it again. You're not gonna want to communicate again. But when you will, so if you get if you get a wrong or a bad response back, you won't want to. Well, you won't want to communicate again until you get a good response back. But you won't get a good response back unless you communicate.
Yeah. That makes sense. And sometimes you have to move on to other people too, right? Just because you tried one time with someone that you maybe thought you can trust, and they weren't really listening to you, they didn't understand you, doesn't mean that everybody doesn't, that everyone's that way, right?
Yes.
So I like how you said talk to your siblings, talk to some friends, talk to mom, talk to other family members, and then the key is not to keep it inside, right? And this is a good principle in general. Just I talk to people all the time, and being a chaplain, folks, sometimes there's a stigma that folks come and talk to chaplain, there's something wrong with them, and they have mental problems, and that's an issue, and when it's really the opposite. We're all dealing with something, right? We all need to talk. We all need to get things off our chest, and so even young people do, obviously, right? So that helped you big time to get through some of those difficult moments. Were you ever you ever feel like you were depressed or just over anxious in non-normal state maybe when compared to when I'm home?
I was of course anxious, but I was never depressed. When they first leave, it doesn't feel right. The first few months or the first month, it doesn't feel right. But then you start getting used to it. It still sucks, but at least it feels quote unquote normal because you've been living like that for a month. But it doesn't immediately feel normal when they leave. Of course, you're gonna have some grieving period. You're gonna need some time to just relax, just focus on something else. But it starts to feel normal after a while. But then for some reason, at the very, very end, it becomes unnormal.
Because is it because you anticipate the homecoming, and you're anxious about them coming back, and life's gonna change again whenever your loved one gets back home, right?
Yeah, because it's good that they're coming back home, and you've realized you've been waiting for this.
Yeah.
The whole time. The whole 6 months. It's the whole build up. So of course you're anxious on when you're gonna see them, where you're gonna see them, and how you and they will react.
Yeah, so and you went through a pretty unique time, and others have been through this as well with regard to COVID, right? Because not only did we have COVID to deal with, me leaving early, but you're living in a state of uncertainty and where you had to wear masks and things were shut down and closed and limited number of people attending church services and community events, right? So talk a little bit about that for a second, because even though we might be moving somewhat through the pandemic and COVID itself, there's still going to be some lingering effects from that, and you never know when something else might happen. So how hard was that? Was that difficult, or did you feel like because there was a change with me leaving that was just something else that that wasn't that big of a deal?
Well, honestly, before you even left, I thought it wasn't that big of a deal, because it didn't. It didn't affect me, because of course, our sports were closed down. I was sad about that, but we knew that was reopening. It was reopening later down the line. It mainly affected someone like my sister, who her sport all of her friends are there. Her sport shut down because of COVID. Luckily, it's back up now. But honestly, that more affected her than it affected me and my brother. But there was still some sort of effect, like we couldn't go karting because it was closed for a week, or we couldn't what was I gonna say? We couldn't go to the trampoline park because it was closed for a week, and it didn't affect me as much as it would affect my sister. Okay,
that's good. Yeah. Again, I think that you hit some key points, and as we kind of wrap up this time, and I want to, thanks for talking through some of this. I know it's not super easy, but you helped me to see some things, and I hope others will, as they tune into the podcast here, that they're gonna prepare maybe differently for a future deployment, or even now. You start talking to your kids now, talk to your family now about the possibilities of, hey, mom or dad has to go do this, right? Or again, if you're close to a niece or a nephew and they're used to seeing you there, any young person, right? Just being able to hear your perspective has been really good. So if I were to sum up a couple things, right? Because one of the things I want to do on this podcast, again, we're focused on the whole person, mind, body, spirit, social. Want to give tools. In case you don't know this, Caleb, this is something that I'm trying to really emphasize in our podcast, is what's called a life plan, and that's thinking about your whole life, your personal life, your work life, and everything in between. Okay, so these podcasts are going to help give what I would say resources or tools, if you will, that you're putting inside of your toolkit that you're going to use one day, right? So I think everybody in uniform, every spouse that has a loved one that serves, this is a toolkit. This is a resource they're going to put in their toolkit as preparing them and preparing their kids for deployment. So if I were to summarize, and maybe you could help me with this, but one thing you had said is you need to talk. You got to find an outlet to talk to, right? Connect by being verbal, about sharing your feelings. That's important, right? Establish a way you can stay connected with your loved one downrange, and for us, we talked about playing some video games on video chat, buying a Switch, being able to game, do some things like that. And the third thing you sort of kind of mentioned was, and you didn't say this specifically, but I'll ask you this: you're almost like saying you're setting yourself up. You knew it was 6 months, so you knew there was a time it was going to come to an end. So you had this expectation there would be an end in mind. This wasn't going to last forever, right? So keep a mindset that this is going to have an end to it. You just don't know when, right? So be willing to talk, open up. 2, find a way to connect. Technology absolutely is a way. Be consistent with that. And 3, have a mindset of this will come to an end, and it's going to end at some point where they're going to come back home. Would that be a good way to summarize those three things that you were trying to emphasize here?
Yes, I think it would be. Okay.
Anything else that you'd want to share with the youth that might be going through some difficult times? Now, I'll throw this out there to you. Some of our folks are being raised by single parents, right? So as their mom or their dad leaves, their aunt, uncle, some loved one back here is taking care of them. So that's a little different situation for them. Mom, you still had mom home, where some of our folks don't have that opportunity. Anything that you think would be different for them, or did you like to share perspective on that situation?
So I think that you would, even if you have a single mom or a single dad, you should still do the three things. You should still communicate, you should still connect, and you should still know that it will end. Just because you don't have another parent doesn't mean that you can't do any of these. Just that you might not be as close to your aunt or your uncle or grandma, your grandpa, whoever. So the communication aspect might take a little bit more time if you're not as close. Otherwise, just do the same things.
Yeah, that's good.
And just focus on them getting home.
Yeah. And I will say, I think that coming from you versus this coming from me as the chaplain, and even having somebody from the wing in here talk about their child, this is, I think, it means so much more that you're able to come in here and communicate this. And I hope folks that listen, and I think they will, they'll find this valuable. And they use those three techniques, those three tools that we mentioned. Again, what were they again? Three things?
Communication.
Communicate, yep.
Sight on when they're going to come home.
Yep, that was the third one. The second one was connect. Find ways to connect while downrange, right?
So I wasn't trying to go.
No, that's fine. That's fine. But those three things, if you focus on those, you'll have a successful deployment. You'll get through it. And I really believe at the end of the day, and this is where adults have to see this, and kids probably can't see it yet, it's going to make you stronger one day. It's going to make you, as a 12-year-old right there, you're going to be able to face adversity in life because you've been through something like this, and you could reflect on it and look back. How did I get through it? And you focus on those three things: communicate, connect, have an end game mindset. This is going to end. Perspective that's going to end at some point, right? So, hey man, well, thanks for hopping in this cool studio. What do you think about the studio? You like it?
Oh yeah, it looks
pretty
really
neat.
nice.
Little makeshift studio. You can't tell anybody where it is here on Biddle Air National Guard Base because it's in a secret location, right?
Yeah,
but
very secret.
Again, this is called the Balance Podcast. I'm Chaplain Tony Repic. I want to focus on mind, body, spirit, and your social connections. And we're going to be dropping some more episodes out. And we're going to be bringing some folks from the wing that have some expertise in certain areas. Again, more tools in your toolkit. I got some experts in different fields we're going to bring in leadership and in counseling and finances and even fitness that we're going to talk through. We're going to provide you resources. And then ultimately, throughout these podcasts, I'm going to bring some folks in and do a couple podcasts on life planning. And it's not what you're thinking. It's not life planning just your goals in your career. It's not just planning around your finances, but it's planning your entire life at some level where you have control. It's all about that. What you can control in life, because there's so much we can't control. But the one thing we can control is us creating a plan and sticking to it as best we can so that we could be successful in life, we can win at work, and be whole in our day-to-day activity. So, again, thanks for tuning in. The Balance Podcast. I look forward to connecting with you here again soon. Out here.